Welcome to Breakthrough Burnout, the bilingual podcast that helps you understand burnout better and gives you solutions to heal and live again. My name is Florence Parrow, and I am a sophrology practitioner, coach, author, and burnout expert. In this podcast, on my own or in conversation with other specialists, in French or in English, I'll help you understand the full picture of burnout to better avoid it or recover from it. Breakthrough Burnout, the podcast that helps you understand and heal. Hello everyone, welcome to this new episode of Breakthrough Burnout. I am very happy to be joined today by Dr Safia Debar. Safia, probably I'll let you introduce yourself. That's probably the easiest thing.
Thank you, Florence. Yes, it's wonderful to be here with you. Yeah, I'm Dr. Safia Debar. I'm a medical doctor. I'm also an expert in stress management, and I combine the neuroscience with somatic practices. So that's how we feel in our body, as well as integrative and functional medicine. So really looking at the whole. And I do this in my medical practice, in my coaching practice, with individuals, with organizations. But it's really, I think my mission is really about how we can alchemize stress and use it for our good and not see it as a vilified thing that we're trying to control and suppress.
That sounds amazing. Well, so yes, there is obviously a big link between stress and burnout, but also I'm very interested in showing how burnout is not just something that happens in your mind, as it were, and how it does start in the body. Maybe you can, help our listeners understand a bit better how that works.
Yeah, sure. So I think the analogy that I tend to give is if we start with the basics. So if we start with our foundational neuroscience, which is that oversimplified, if you think of yourself as having two main operating systems. So one being us in a state of activation. So we can call it stress, but this is where we are in perhaps system A. So we are in a state of potentially energy, where we are mobilized and we are dealing with a stressor or a threat, which is needing our body to try to protect ourselves, to survive, and we will do it either, and we have all heard of the fight, flight, freeze response. So this is where we are functioning from a specific area of the brain, where we are led by a specific area of the brain, and the purpose of it is to protect us, to help us survive, and we will do it either by, if I feel I can take it on, I will fight. If I feel that it's a bit too overwhelming, then I will, but I have the capacity, I will run away or escape. Or if I feel it's too much for me, I will freeze and shut down. This is determined in the brain, as well as what we think, how we've analyzed the situation. So if we call that system A. So in my system A, I will be operating with a certain physiology. I will have a certain cocktail that's flushing my system. And so my physiology will be a certain way, right? So I give the example, we're having a chat now. Imagine a lion walking through my room. I am going to shift states. So I'm then going to think, oh my God, I'm going to die. So let me shift that state and go into fight, flight, freeze. So I am no longer going to connect, no longer going to pay you attention. I have shifted. So if I see that as my stress response, I've gone up in stress. System B is where I then look and the threat has gone away, or I deem myself to be safe. Then I will enter into a different area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and that stress response gets mopped up. So then I enter into what I call the spring clean. So this is where I'm in a state of rest, recovery, repair, and I then shift into a different state, which again means physiologically I am in a different state, and everything about me is in a different state. It's very important to see this as a cycle. We go up and then we go down. And as long as when we go up, as long as we come back down and we're hitting that baseline and we complete that cycle, then we have recovered, and that will lead us to the ability, the knowing that I can bounce back. So if we see that as a very, very basic kind of a very, very basic summary of our stress response, okay? We are meant to go up and down. We are not meant to stay in one area. If, for whatever reason, ongoing stressors, lack of recovery, repeated hits, repeated stressors, repeated threat, I will stay in system A. So I will stay in chronic stress. So I've gone up in stress, and instead of coming back down, I stay there. So my physiology, cortisol in particular, which is meant to be short-lived, not sustained, instead of going up and coming down, stays up. And so what that then leads to are chronic changes in my physiology, in how I behave, in my behaviors, in my thought processes. There's a whole kind of domino effect. And so over time, if I don't recover and I stay there, it will change my brain, it will change my physiology, it will change everything, and eventually lead to what we call burnout, which is multifaceted, and I'm sure you've spoken about it at length, but this is where we are in a state of chronic stress. There is lack of recovery. Traditionally, the studies were done at work, so compassion fatigue, exhaustion, etc. So it's very important to see our stress response as normal, but as a cycle. And we have two facets. And like in athletes, they have a training phase and a rest phase. Both are important. So we shouldn't vilify the stress. We shouldn't downplay the recovery. We should see them as equal partners, and we should see it as a cycle.
Fabulous. So in a way, when we are in burnout, we are stuck in one side of this cycle and not being truly able to get out of it in some way.
Yeah.
That's when stress does become the villain in a way, if you can put it that way. And when there's too much.
Yeah.
Too much of it. Too much of everything is never really a good thing, is it?
Yeah. And in my experience, I find that we focus so much on the stress and too much of the stress, or being stuck in stress, but often it's the lack of recovery, because we're either conditioned to feel that recovery is, optional, that recovery is for the weak, or that we don't value that side of the equation. So often it's not, because I think there are uncontrollable stressors, but I am always in control of my recovery. That I can control. I can't control if anything happens in the world. There's certain things that are less in my control, but I found that we skew much more to the stress side of the equation, when actually my job, whether it's in my medical practice, in my coaching practice, with organizations, is to focus on the recovery part, because that is the strategic bit of the equation to start off with. And it's only when we start to understand the neuroscience and bring the conversation away from I should be okay and I should push on and I don't need to listen to the signs, that we can start to implement change and start to reduce it. But it's a whole systematic approach.
Absolutely. So what signs would you recommend that people are really careful about, that would show them that it's getting late in a way in the day?
Well, getting late, I think that, first of all, I would always kind of tune in and kind of assess. Again, I like to kind of do the full story. So what kind of person am I? And speaking from I call it my happy burnout. So I'm of the opinion of, I like to push my limits. So I like to see how far I can push it. And have realized that when I do go too far, then I slip down into these signs. For me, a very, very good place to start is the recovery. So am I able to switch off? Am I able to sleep and stay asleep and feel safe in my body? We have to go to the sign. I want us to bypass the mind, because I could be saying to you, no, but I'm fine. Okay, I might be fine, but what is my physiology? So start, just because you can't outwit your physiology, right? So as a doctor, I can examine you. So I will be checking, your heart rate variability, your pulse rate, your blood pressure, etc. So that's one side in terms of our signs and symptoms. Are there any signs of inflammation? But then in your day-to-day, I want to know, do you feel energetic? We've normalized fatigue. We've normalized it. Everyone's like, but it's not normal to be bouncy out of bed. Yes, it is. Why can't we raise that bar? So fatigue, general tiredness, sleep is a big one. The ability to focus, so to maintain focus, how we are thinking. So am I the kind of, the paradox of multitasking? Do I have fractured attention? Am I all over the place? And then I look kind of system by system in the body. So I just start at the top and work my way down. So how is my thinking? Am I overall negative, catastrophic? Am I ruminating? Am I overthinking? What is my breathing? I teach breathwork as well for that reason, in that I will just watch how you breathe. Am I breathing very shallow? Am I having to take these deep breaths? And then the gut, how is my gut functioning? How is my heart? Am I having palpitations? Am I having recurring infections? Think about your house and what happens if you don't clean it regularly, right? And similarly, if we don't recover regularly, then infections take a bit longer to clear. We tend to be sick all the time. And then we go deeper into the systems. So, metabolic health, what is your blood sugar level? Do you have a pattern of weight gain? We always look at around the abdomen. So I know I'm jumping all over the place, but it's just important to think, okay, is my body changing? Am I storing my weight around my midriff, and is it difficult to shift? What are my behaviors like? Am I having to self-soothe with alcohol, with food, with overworking? Fundamentally, do I feel, one of the questions, and I know you do this in French, so I'm like, what, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bouncy are you? My joie de vivre, right? How bouncy are you? And let's not normalize that kind of sluggishness. That is not normal. And I would go system by system by system by system. But the first one that generally goes is how we think, our general approach to life, exhaustion, sleep, and changes in our behavior. Because if I'm stressed, right, imagine I have a lot of cortisol in my system, I'm going to want to eat different. I'm not going to want to move. I'm not going to want to connect. I might isolate myself. I might busy myself. So I want people to start to look at themselves as a whole. We are not meant to be to-do list machines. We are also meant to live. So I would look at, what is this balance between me going up in stress and me recovering? Or has it just blurred into one? So there are lots and lots of signs there. And all I would say is, it's not about eliminating stress. I want my high performers to be in stress. I want them to know their stress. But what I'm about is normalizing and optimizing active recovery. And for that, and women in particular, we have to give ourselves permission. And we have to start to revolutionize, like really it's a revolution in rest. It's a revolution. And I'm not talking about like doing nothing. I'm talking proper active recovery, like the athletes doing. All high performers who are sustained in their high performance and who are happy and that do it well will prioritize both.
I agree. I agree. It's very funny because I just had a book come out. My latest book came out last Thursday, and
Congratulations.
it's in French, but it's on fatigue. And it's exactly, what I start with. It's like, let's stop normalizing fatigue. It's not normal to feel tired all the time, to wake up tired.
Yeah.
And it's such a huge subject, I think, as a society, that we are normalizing fatigue and nearly wearing it as a badge of honor. When,
Yes.
as you say, I mean, the top performers, the Olympians, all professional athletes, they rest. They are not going to go into what they do with feeling too tired, because there's a big risk of injury and of a
Yeah.
career ending there. And we don't apply that to our own lives, which is completely ridiculous, because we're all built, it's the same. Well, we're not exactly functioning exactly the same, but we are, we have limits. And it's important to know them. I find that with a lot of people who come to me for burnout, they don't know their limits. They think they can do it. They say, "Oh, I'm fine. I'll be fine. I'll manage. Everything's fine. How are you? Great. Busy but great." No, let's take that apart.
I know, and I think it's an interesting concept because we naturally want to push our limits. And if I feel fine in terms of what I feel is to be fine, because also remember that when we have more cortisol on board, it does change how our brain is wired.
It does.
It does change the link between the hypothalamus, the part of the brain, the pituitary, the kind of regulator of hormones, that axis. So if I start being used to a certain level, then my body will adapt to that level. And so my metabolism, my way of thinking, all of that kind of, everything kind of shifts. And so I will normalize. And so I'm then more wired to it. So it's not about, I think, limits are good to be kind of brushed against and pushed. But then I think it's really about the awareness and to start to see yourself as a journey, because sometimes we do need to push through. It's really more about looking at it as a cycle, Like I used to, in one of my stress management courses, I used to give the analogy of a washing machine. And if you think of your stress cycle as when you put your load in, so you put the load in, you press start, and it completes the cycle, right? If I have read my manual and I respect that washing machine, I will allow it to stop completely and wait. I then take the washing out, I do whatever, and I give it a bit of a rest. If, however, I'm like, no, it's fine. I put another load in, it's just barely slowing down, I take it out. I put another one in, I take it out. Over time, that washing machine is going to start leaking, the clothes are not going to be great, etc. So see it. And sometimes we have to go through it to learn. Like we can either learn through inspiration, where it's like, yeah, I would love that. Or the more powerful learning,
It's a hard way.
from desperation and feeling that pain. So it's totally fine to brush up against it, and I'm the first one to go there. But fundamentally, look and see and ask yourself, why? What am I doing this for? Is this a conditioned response that it's just I'm meant to? Because we can now show neuroscience, everything. Start there. Don't take anybody's word for it. See how you are and start to align yourself with what it is that you want. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Because it's costing you something. And some people will say to me, Safia, I'm CEO for 4 years, I'm pushing myself, and then it's done. Okay. As long as you are aware and you've made that conscious decision, then it will minimize that inflammation on your system. But the issues arise when people are in conflict. That's where it's an internal as well as an external. And I always say, does your internal yes sound like an external yes? Does your internal no sound like an external no? If there is conflict, then your body is having to mop up that inflammation.
I think that's a very, very important point. It's the awareness. knowing where you are and what you're doing. And as you pointed out, I think the awareness starts in the body.
Yes.
It's probably one of the best tips we can give if we go into, so how do we do this in a way? How do we pay attention? How do we avoid burnout? And still live a very full life. But I think listening to the body, I know through sophrology that's the main thing we do. But I think listening to the body and getting to know yourself and what is really right and aligned for you is essential, isn't it?
Yeah, and the body doesn't, there have been lots of books written about it, but it's about trusting that body because it has so many answers and it has so much wisdom, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to connect with it. But it means we are speaking, for many of us, a completely different language. And in my breathwork classes, often, I start with random analogies, but I always say, if anybody's bilingual, right? So for example, Florence, if you spoke French first, right? See that as the language, as your first language, and then you learn another language, right? When you are learning that second language, you're still using that template of your first language. So when you're learning, I don't know, Spanish, you might be translating it into your head, right? But fundamentally, how do we learn a second language? We immerse ourselves in it, we remain curious, and we trust it. And we know that there is a point where it doesn't make sense. It doesn't come naturally. But if I continue to listen to the language of the body versus the language of the mind, then I will start to become truly bilingual. And it's not that one language is better than the other, although I would always favor the language of the body. But if I'm starting now to say, well, what is she talking about? Language of the body. Okay. How do I breathe? And how do I feel? And not taking those emotions and trying to label them with thoughts, just literally feeling them. Then I allow the body to express itself. And then if I learn about brain waves and what happens when I'm in different brainwave states, then I can just allow that to flow. I don't have to get stuck in the mind you cannot talk yourself out of it. You have to feel yourself through it. And we feel ourselves through it by starting bit by bit by bit, learning the language of my body that, by the way, I knew as a kid very well, but schooling, primary caregivers, culture, society told me, no, you can't trust that. Override. You say you're tired, no, you're going to push through. No, we push through. You say no, you mean yes. Little tiny subtleties that tell me, no, I can't listen to this. So I start to reduce the linguistic ability of listening to this part and start to develop this language when actually we're meant to be bilingual. We're meant to be going from one to the other and respecting the language of the body. You don't have to agree. I just want you to validate and to listen. That's it. It's kind of like, I could say, no, I'm fine. No, there's a difference between saying I'm not fine and I choose to continue. Don't dismiss how you are feeling. And we all know how we are truly feeling. So just be okay with it. You don't have to change your behavior, but validate your emotional state, your physiological state, and do not use your mind to make sense of it. Let it be.
Absolutely. Listening to the body, being truly aware of how we are. You mentioned as well breath work. Any other tip you might want to add to how we can do this?
I think when I work with patients or clients or organizations, I think it's really more first about that willingness. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a risk because I think a lot of people are worried that if they go down this route, it will mean. Now, when we are faced with, complete exhaustion and we are literally burning out, then sometimes we have no choice. So that is kind of forced upon us. However, if we are getting these signs, the earlier we kind of go into it, the much easier that process is. I believe that everybody has to come to their own threshold. I believe people have different thresholds, and some people need to burn out completely, and that may be the best thing for them. So it's not about imposing, but rather I would invite people to be open and willing and receptive just to look at the data. You don't have to, because sometimes it can feel really like, what do you want me to do? You want me to quit my job? You want me to this? It's like, no, can we just honor where you are first? So I think it's that when people are willing and when people come to me, I don't convince anybody. I'm not there to make people recover or rest. But I would say we start with the lowest hanging fruit, so the easiest thing. And what we feel is, I think that we feel that we need to have a complete overhaul and a complete revamp in how we do life, and you really, really don't. So in my podcast, I talk about micro movement, it's these small, cumulative, sustained little things that just start to buffer. And I feel that if we're too stuck in the mind, getting into more experiential states. So this is why I always say, just come to one breathwork session. That's it. Because you can't unremember how you felt. And if you experience like this other language and you feel the effect, then you really can't. And so I would say the awareness, the willingness, the curiosity, and learn about your neuroscience. Take yourself out of it. Like literally, it's got nothing to do with you. You don't need to demonize yourself. You don't need to blame yourself. This is a system that's actually been built to protect you. So everything that you are doing started to protect you, so that we can start to have a bit more compassion,
Absolutely.
I'm very grateful for burning out. I think that it's taught me so much. And I personally needed to hit threshold. And I always call it a happy burnout because it wasn't, a big collapse or anything, but it was a kind of, really illuminating. And it's a choice. And I think, to go back to your values and what is important is massive.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Safia. Now, there's a question I ask all my guests, if you're happy with that, is what helps you find serenity and balance in your life?
So the concept that it's I think I've over the years been giving myself the grace and the permission to be led by authenticity. So my personal values that I've had to kind of figure out, I knew them, but are authenticity. So I feel that when I am truly able to be me, not what is expected or what I should or even what I'm good at or anything like that, if I allow myself to be led by what I truly enjoy, love, then that leads me on to one of my other core values, which is freedom. So this sense of I choose, even though, like if we're talking about work, when I choose my work, so I have a couple of medical clinics, but I also do the coaching. I'm actually busier now than I was before when I was told, but the fact that I choose means it's not inflammatory for me anymore. So I think giving myself permission to be led by that language of, Safia, does this energize you? Does this bring you joy? Does this bring you growth? And prioritizing, non-negotiable, the recovery. Do I recover every single day? Of course not. But now I see it as it's non-negotiable. If I have, so tonight, as you know, I'm jet lagged. The next 2 nights, non-negotiable, everything else gets cancelled. And it's a revolutionary act because you are having to say no. which in itself, and so when you say no, I need to be able to process and feel that energy of disappointing the other. Things, things like that come up. So what helps me is to be led by what inspires me and energizes me, and work that I truly, truly love, and holding myself in such high esteem, and it's not even high, but high regard, and it's not even that high, whereby it's non-negotiable. My recovery is non-negotiable. And if I can't do it now, I know when. So I think for me, it's that, especially when you're balancing a lot. And I think almost being having my own back, like if you have a child and you're like, I'm so sorry, but no, they have to sleep. Like, it's not worth it for me. So I just know the cost now of not doing that. So I know that one bad night of sleep will cost me 2 days of productivity and focus. I know that not exercising will cost me a state of sluggishness and laziness, and then it will cost me change in my diet. So I think it's just knowing what is everything costing me, and then realizing that actually you can't put a price on like that feeling. Absolutely. So yeah, that's how I do it. But it's breath work, movement. It's the basis, like the really, and for me, I need some agency and some choice in life. So maintaining that has been instrumental for me. Yeah.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Safia, for being here today with me. And I will see you all very soon for a new episode of Breakthrough Burnout, the podcast that helps you understand and heal.